Well, hey there, my name's Chris. Welcome to the acreage. This week was supposed to be all about getting a huge amount done, but two big things got in my way. One, it rained. It rained so much. And two, I have somebody messing with me, and I'm not enjoying it very much. In June 2025, I decided that I had enough of waiting. I have 220 acres of Northern Ontario wilderness that I want to turn into my dream homestead. I realized that the only way to achieve my goals is by getting off the couch and building them, no matter what the cost. Join me as I plan and build my future, turning my apocalypse into a Zen Armageddon. I came to the property earlier this week and pulled into the driveway and the chain was gone, which was weird, especially since like the chain wasn't lying on the ground or whatever. It was like gone. But a moose had been on the game camera earlier in the week, and I thought, well, it's unlikely. I thought it was possible, maybe, that the moose, like if it was browsing or whatever, wasn't paying attention, walked into the chain and got it caught in his rack. And like jewelry is off in the woods, making the women swoon over him. But I also thought that was really unlikely. But in any case, it's not like the chain was a prized possession. But I also didn't want to replace it with another chain and have another chain go missing. I mean, it seems weird that the chain would be missing and there's no tire tracks into the property. Nothing was out of order. Everything seemed fine, which is weird. So anyways, I took the rope that I broke in last week's video, and since it was basically stretched and destroyed, doesn't really much matter, and I strung it back across the gate. I put flagging tape on it because, you know, you don't want people to not be able to see it, hit it by accident or whatever else. And I tied it off at both ends so that if by some weird fluke a moose were to hit it again, then it would be obvious because of the amount of damage caused. Because, you know, 1,000-pound animal bumping into a rope, well, the rope is going to probably just break. And worst case scenario, it might pull in the posts, but it's going to be pretty obvious that something happened that was, let's call it, completely accidental. And I put that rope last night at 6 p.m. and I went home and that was that. I came back and I was at the property this morning at 10 a.m. and the rope was gone. Not like just, you know, broken or like what I thought might happen if a moose came into it. And there was no moose on the game cam this time anyways. But no, it was untied and removed. So somebody has decided it's a good idea to mess with me and mess with my property, which makes no sense at all. I've met a lot of my neighbors of late. All of them seem very pleasant, very happy to be out here, happy to have me as a neighbor. We chit chat and, you know, offer each other services if necessary. You know, we exchange numbers. You know, if we see anything untoward, we'll let each other know. And, you know, the kind of community you expect to have in a rural area. I talked to my neighbor earlier today, and one of the other neighbors that usually goes up and down the road on his four-wheeler, had a chat with him, and yeah, they have never heard of anything of the sort. And I mean, that chain has been there for over a year. Like, if somebody that lives here took umbrage with it, I would imagine that something would have happened to it by now. So let me step back for a minute before I get to that. This week was wet. For the most part this fall, we have had almost no rain. And it's been beautiful blue skies almost the entire time. And in the last 4 days, we have gotten a stupid amount of rain. So I had emptied the mosquito traps. And there is almost 3.5 inches of rain in here from 3 days. And I'll tell you, we don't normally get that kind of rain here. But it was crazy wet. It was far too wet to really be able to do anything, mainly because my driveway not being properly finished becomes a bit of a mud slick. And I did come out here yesterday, and it was raining a little bit, and it didn't disappoint. It was slippery as all get out, but it wasn't as bad as it would have been when it was cats and dogs raining. But I wanted to start building my dog trot this week. And I did. I managed to get a fair bit done on that. I'm still sort of figuring out the lay of the log, as it were, trying to figure out how I want to set the logs and how I want to arrange them. But on the fireplace side of the dog trot, it's going to be open and really rough. And I figure right now, what I most need to have is a roof at the build site so I can leave stuff there and not have to worry about it getting wet. Right now I have everything sort of underneath a tarp, and you know, all it takes is a stiff wind, and even though I have a bunch of pieces of wood on top of it, to have that blow off, and then I could ruin a bunch of my stuff, which obviously I don't want to have happen. So I'm building that part of the dog trot right now with just rough logs, basically poplar at this point, because I have a whole bunch of it and I don't really expect it to last worth a dingle. It's really prone to rotting as it is, and so I'm just putting down what I've got. But the idea is just to get something up so that way I can build the next piece attached to it, eventually build the cabin part, and then once all of that is done, I'm going to come back and probably redo that section of the dog trot. But for now, it's a priority just to get it up and running. You know, it's important to note that it is getting colder. Now, as I suspected, the forecast was not that good. And so while it had said this week was going to be fairly warm, it's not. It's only 9 degrees right now, and we are now regularly going below zero at night. So, you know, we can't rely on concrete, and there's just a matter of time before the snow flies. And I want to have some shelter before that happens. So that's underway. All right, so the sketch that I put in last week's video, I tried to get the dimensions of this area based on this log, which is 25 feet long. I remembered it as 27 feet long, and it was tilted up on an angle. So the overall size of the land in the image was overstated a little bit. And ultimately, I kind of want to center on the fireplace here, just so that way I build up the open dog trot side on this side, and I have a decent covering over this, so that way I can kind of enclose this just, well, cheaply and easily, so that way I can use it sort of as a staging ground where I'm doing things that are a little more relaxing perhaps, but also just something I wouldn't want to do inside. But in mind of how long it's taking to get everything done, now I'm just thinking in terms of what can I get done in the shortest amount of time, so that way I have a complete stage that I can move off from. Right now I'm thinking 12-ish feet. I'm also thinking towards what I want the the enclosed cabin on this side to be. That in some ways the extra width doesn't really cost me anything. Yeah, I need more logs for it ultimately, but I don't know that it really makes a big difference, the extra 2 feet over 10. But it's a question of having space. This hill here isn't level at all, so I have to bring it up on this side, and I can close this. But if I can enclose this, then I have sort of something to work off from. And then I can use these long logs from the outside wall, not the back wall. They're not going to go full length. So once the dog trot half is built, the spanning logs are just going to sit on top of it and go across. I can put them on a post or whatever else and enclose that whole area. I'm also thinking about making sure that now that we're actually in fall where it's going to be a lot wetter, building up the side tee so that I have another enclosed space where I could be peeling logs and doing whatever and not have to worry about the rain, which could be freestanding at first. And in order to move faster, just do everything up until the actual log structure that is going to be fully enclosed. Do everything with just raw logs, so it's fast, easy. And then if I decide that I want them to be in peeled logs so that way they last longer, I can take them out one at a time, replace them with a different log or peel a log, put it up in its place, and then switch out all the logs over time. But at least I can do that covered. Whereas right now, it's supposed to rain for the next 3 days, and I don't really want to be doing this in the wet because that's just miserable at this time of year. So I want to try and get as much done as I can while it's not crazy raining. This side of the dog trot I think is going to be easy because I'm just going to V-notch the logs, so that way I can basically put them in really, really quickly. Since I'm not peeling them, I'm not doing anything. Basically cut the length, notch them where they need to be notched, set them in, call it a day and move on. Then once I have this up, I can go across this way with 2 peeled logs to give me this space and then tee off of them that way. I think that'll be quick. I feel like it's quick. The only thing that's holding me up is whether this should be 10 feet or 12 feet. What you see here, where the tape is now, that is 12 feet. And 10 feet would be right to here. So it would be a little narrower. Let's cut a couple of pieces and see how it feels. That's 5'4". So I skimmed back through a couple of my previous videos, and one of the sort of things that really annoyed me as I watched them was how oftentimes I hurried through something just to get it done, and I didn't at least take a minute or two to stop and say, yeah, is this what I want? Not that it's really mattered up until this point, but now that I'm building a structure, it does matter. So the log behind me is 12 feet long. That's 5'2". This is probably about 6.5, 7 feet. Obviously tilted down. I have to build up on this side just a little bit, so that way the logs stay more or less level. I'm not being too precious about this one because it's going to be open mostly, so it doesn't really matter. But as I'm standing here, or sitting here I suppose, I realized that this would be a great place to have a workbench. So having it deep enough so that way I can have a workbench here and maybe even set up like a saw or something on one side, so that way I can do some more precision carpentry. I have somewhere to do that, which I don't have at home and I don't have here, so that could be cool. I have down in one of the sheds I have a bench from a friend of mine who passed away a few years ago that I could use. That would be perfect for that, and I wouldn't have to build anything. Before I commit to this, I'm going to have to measure that. One way or another, I'm going to have to level out the floor. If that just means like skimming a flat on one side of a couple logs and then putting a couple boards in between, just so that way it's not all cattywampus like it is here. So then this log goes 25 feet that way, and it's actually much closer to the rock on that side than I was expecting. So I'd like to be able to have the back side of the foundation sitting on that rock over there. And the whole thing spans all the way across. But like if this side is all just poplar, I have more than enough poplar now, I think, to build the side up and do what I need to do. And that solves a whole pile of problems. So at first on this side, I'm just gonna put a couple of pieces of wood across the top and then drape a tarp over it. Which most of the roofs along here are just gonna be tarp roofs. But I do want to eventually get them all sloped fairly significantly, so that way water can run away and snow can slide off as well. The last time I built a cabin in the woods, I had a fairly long span across, and what ended up happening is that the tarp, through the weight of the snow and rain, came down and then created a large pond that ended up freezing, and it was really hard to get out. And part of that was because I had the roof purlins were too far apart, so I just need to do more small sticks, and that'll help with that. And a slightly steeper roof pitch, like the one that I had done. It's actually back there in the woods, still sitting there. The roof pitch was only like 212, which wasn't enough. I'm thinking like 412, 512 at least. Maybe even 612 if I have the gumption. Enough talking. Let's get it done. Man, some of those logs are heavy. The thing about poplar is it is got a lot of water in it. So the 12-foot sections that I'm using on the backside of the dog trot weigh between 100 and 150 pounds. They're seriously heavy, and it's a little bit of a pain to move them around. And well, over time, I'll get there. when I came back today and found that the gate had taken a walk, well, that ruined my plans for today. I went back to the build site and I stood there and looked at it and a car went by. My immediate thought was, is that them? Have they come back? While I don't necessarily want to have a confrontation, I also don't want this to be the sort of thing that becomes a long-term exchange of gate materials. I have a decent gate, one that I've been meaning to install. The gate that was there was always just temporary, but it's a $400 gate, and I don't really want to install that if somebody's going to help themselves. There's been a couple of people that have been driving down the road really slowly while I've been here. I suspect hunting, looking for birds. So I'm going to put it up this tree a fair ways, enough screws in it so that way if somebody tries to take them down, they have lots of time to end up on camera. Next step, game camera. So now I've put up the signs at the driveway. I'm going to add another pair of signs closer to the swamp, and I'm going to basically sign the whole length. And I'm seriously considering putting a red dot. A red dot means that no hunting, no trespassing. And while I don't want to do that because it actually limits my ability to hunt on the property, at this point I don't really care, because I'd rather not be able to hunt on my property than have to worry about people that are looking to mess about. And because the consequences of violating that are pretty serious. Like I said, every time a car goes by, it's like, is it them? So I put the other half of the rope onto the end of the gate, put up the signs, and I put up the game camera in a hidden location. I'm not going to show you, just in case by some wild fluke of nature, somebody who knows where this property is watching. I also put up a whole bunch of dummy cameras all over the place, so that if somebody does come and they're like, oh, there's the camera, and they're going to go after it, by the time that they actually find the real camera, the camera will have sent off the images to me, and I'll have a license plate, or at least a picture of the person who's doing it. Because if I can get a picture of the plate, I'm going to take it to the police right away. I'm not messing around. I don't take lightly to veiled threats, and I don't want to spend my life at this property having to be worried about somebody who's decided to take umbrage against me because, I don't know, they think they have the right. They think that, well, maybe they've been coming here for several years and therefore this is theirs to use. But no, this is private property, and I own it, and now it's signed, and stay off, thank you very much. So before the rope gate was stolen, I was actually pretty convinced that it was a moose, and I put together a little skit. I figure I made it, might as well at least show it to you. Today on Woodland's Most Wanted, we have the caper of the missing gate chain. The homeowner came to the property 2 mornings past and discovered the chain was gone. No evidence, no tracks, no evidence of a struggle. The only real evidence that we have is one single screw that was responsible for holding the chain to this post. This screw has been doing the job for over a year and had no problem doing it, but it was twisted and nearly pulled out of the wood. So the chain was likely pulled out by force. But unexpectedly, there was no evidence of anything having happened within the property on the game camera, except for one single intruder. A 7-foot-tall, 1,000-pound, ugly dude that looked like he had bad intentions. It's entirely possible that that moose came up to this gate, instead of walking over like every other moose has up until this point, decided to put his head down, not necessarily paying attention to the fact that there was a chain there, and got it caught on his rack and got scared and ran off into the bush. Or perhaps he was preparing for Halloween and needed a ghost costume. Either way, the chain is gone. Now we suspect that the moose left very fast, being upset that he had chain on his rack. Or it's possible he was preparing for Halloween in order to be able to be a ghost. We're not really sure which, but either way, that would be the only way that that chain would have left on a moose. So if you see this moose in the woodlands of Northern Ontario carrying a chain, call 1-800-555-3482 and tell them that you've seen a moose with a chain on his rack. Well, all in all, I really didn't get what I wanted done this week. Now that I finally have the permit, I really want to get going with it. I want to stop having the excuses. Here I am having excuses anyway. The rain was, kind of hard to avoid, but at the same time, I know I need to get to the point where weather is no longer a barrier because, like I said earlier, snow is going to start flying. There's going to be more and more rain. Normally our winters are actually quite wet. So what we've had up until now is a huge anomaly, but, a deep irony in the fact that, I finally get the barrier out of my way for the bureaucracy, and then the weather turns. If I had gotten it 4 weeks ago, I'd already have the dog trot completed, or at least I like to think I would. But it is what it is. This is a journey, and sometimes you run smack into a wall in the middle of your driveway. So not as much to show you this week, of course, but it is what it is. So like, subscribe, and comment down below, Gate Thief, so I know you made it this far. And now that my channel is really starting to grow, I'd really like to get to know some of you guys, so that way I can sort of have a sense of who's watching my videos, and not just watching them, but watching them to the end. So we'll see you next week as I keep working on the dog trot.